job of the liver? Remember, add to your notes, remember we learned that the liver is the one that converts ammonia to urea. That's another job of the liver, right? Okay. So, now let's look at the anatomy of your small intestines. Compare the fold in the stomach. In the stomach is called rugae because the folds are just only temporary. But in the small intestine, these folds never disappear. So we call them permanent folds or plicae circularis. They have different purposes. The folds in the stomach is to allow more room for storage. But here is to increase surface area because the bus keeps moving by what again? Peristalsis. Okay. Histologically, you should know what you're looking at, and we're going to go into more detail for histology in the lab downstairs. The morning people already went over the histology. But one thing I want to stress, in the duodenum, this is the duodenum, you're going to see lots of submucosal glands again. They're called Brunner's glands. Just glands in the submucosa. And you know what they're doing? They're making a lot of mucus, right? Because the duodenum is the first one that receives the acidic chyme. Remember, in the mouth is called McDonald's, then you swallow bolus, and then in the stomach, that bolus will be converted to chyme. And the chyme is acidic, so the duodenum makes sense to have a lot of these submucosal glands, right here, a lot of glands. And then by the time you get to the ileum, so let's look at the story. Before we get to the story, there's three things or three features of the small intestines that increase its surface area, making it ideal to finish up digestion and absorb. Okay? One is the plicae circularis because it's permanent. And then if you cut one plicae right here, one fold, you're going to see that the fold has many smaller folds. The smaller folds are called villus. This one fold is that one, the villus. And then, of course, you look at one columnar cell. The apical surface of one columnar cell will have folds called microvillus. You remember that from 241, the microvillus. So these three features help to increase the surface area of your small intestines. And the microvillus is the one that makes it look like a brush border. And that's why we call them brush border enzymes. Okay? So if you look at the story of your small intestines, we just go here first. Right here. We just summarize the story. In the duodenum of the small intestine, this is where there is mixing between the pancreatic enzymes, right? And the bile. There's mixing right here, meaning chemical digestion is very active there. When you get to the jejunum, which is the longest part of the small intestine, the first half, still chemical digestion, but towards the end, there will be lots and lots of absorption already. By the time you get to the ileum, you have already absorbed any meaningful nutrients that you want to absorb. The ileum, which right here, this is the ileum, close to the cecum of the colon, that's where feces begins. Okay? Okay, so now we're going to go to this one right here, the duodenum. We're looking at now the cellular details, the cells of the mucosa of the duodenum. What do they secrete? we know that they secrete those enzymes, lactase, sucrase, maltase, enterokinase. Some of the columnar cells secrete that. Some columnar cells will be enteroendocrine because they make secretin and cholecystokinin. And then you see another hormone right here, gastric inhibitory peptide, which is self-explanatory. What's the target and what is its effect on the target?
Stomach to
Inhibit the activity of the stomach because the duodenum is busy. So these are the three hormones of the enteroendocrine cells of the duodenum that I want you to remember. You have gastrin from the stomach, you have these three from the duodenum. Okay? Here, the columnar cells of the small intestines, they're named. Okay? We know that this one, the ones that make lactase, we'll just call them secretory cells. And then here, goblet cell, we know what goblet cells make. Absorptive, now you see absorptive. You didn't see absorptive cells anywhere else. In the stomach, you don't absorb anything except for, what is it? This morning I said, what is absorbed in the stomach is alcohol and aspirin. Right? We absorb aspirin. So that's why they say eat ice cream or whatever, have a full stomach so that you can drink more before you go to the drinking party. But be careful. Okay. Some of the goblet cells, some of the columnar cells here are called Paneth cells. They have an immune function. They're phagocytic and they secrete lysozymes. So they're also protective. Okay? Any question on the cells of the mucosa of the small intestine? Look at.
Are they columnar?
They're all columnar. Very good question. These are the columnar epithelium, simple columnar epithelium. They're just named based on what they do. We'll call them enteroendocrine if they make these hormones. They're called goblet. They're called Paneth cells. They're called absorptive. And then for this one, we call them secretory cells because they secrete enzymes. Make sense? Okay? Look. Simon, look. Look. See, now you see the blood vessels. Right? Because now we can start absorbing. You have two sets of capillaries. The blood capillaries, the red and the blue. Right? The red is this is the deoxygenated, that's the oxygenated, nutrient-poor blood. And then the blue is the deoxygenated but nutrient-rich. It's going to go to the portal vein, etc. And then you see this one, the green, that's a lacteal. You know what absorbs in the lacteal? The fat, right? Everything else can enter the blood, no problem. But the fat, it doesn't mix with water very well. So it has to enter the lacteals first. And while in the lacteals, that's how it's going to be converted to a water-soluble form so that by the time it joins your subclavian vein towards the superior vena cava, it's now in water-soluble lipoprotein. Okay, you're going to see this word lipoprotein again when we go to the next chapter. Okay? So there's your intestinal juice. The intestinal juice contains secretions from the pancreas, plus the secretions from the duodenum, these brush border enzymes that help with digestion. Very easy. What's the pH? Alkaline. What is alkaline? High or low pH? High. You need to remember that for acid-base balancing. We're almost in chapter 26. Acid-base balance. Okay? Okay, where are we? Okay. Next. So, is there any mechanical digestion going on in the small intestine? Maybe just segmentation where we lock them in segments to facilitate basically the chemical digestion of all of your nutrients. So by the time the chyme makes it to the jejunum, you're ready to absorb. Okay? Jejunum is mainly where you absorb, and then the ileum is last stop where you start seeing feces. Okay? So be sure you go look at the histological difference between these sections of the small intestine, which we will discuss further downstairs. And then, now we're ready to absorb. Look, Simon. Look at what you absorb. 2, blood, right? Blood capillaries and your lacteals. Look here, here. This is the brush border. This is mainly your jejunum. You see, now they are individual monomers. Now they can enter. So the amino acids and glucose, no problem, enter blood capillary. But these fatty acids must enter the green, the lacteals. So we call this dietary fat. Dietary fat means it came from your just food that you ate, dietary fat. And it has to be converted to a lipoprotein, meaning the fat has to be coated by a protein, lipoprotein. There's one dietary fat, or the one form, when the dietary fat enters, it's absorbed in chylomicron form. You will see this again when we get to the next chapter. When you see that, that's a lipoprotein. That's very important. You'll see when you get to the next chapter. But how do you absorb? 2 ways. Lymphatics and your blood capillaries. Okay? Now we're ready to poop soon. There's your colon. Colon is also called the large intestine. Any questions so far? So, in the small intestine, in the duodenum and jejunum, it's still called chyme. When you get to the ileum, you change the name to feces, right? Because you're done absorbing. In the feces is your reject. Where is the feces going to go? In the toilet. Flush the toilet. Right? Everything that you have absorbed have already been absorbed. Is a question. Can you go reverse from the blood out? No. Now do you believe what they say? This is the detox diet. Right? They say, okay, eat this because it's going to get rid of the toxic in your body. Is that true? No, right? How can you go reverse? No, I don't think it can. Because I heard, oh, that's really going to suck up the poisonous things in the liver, whatever. Baloney, isn't it? How can you do that? Doesn't work that way. Okay? So it's just really big business. It's not FDA regulated. That's why they make a lot of money. Okay, next. We're now in the colon, and the colon, the reason it's called colon is because it has a larger diameter. It's not because it has a large job, but here, you know that you should identify the parts of the colon in the cat, right? The first part is called the cecum. It's the one that connects with the ileum, and there's a valve there, an opening called the ileocecal valve. So that's the one that receives the feces. And that's why you have your appendix there, right? And this one is lymphatic, lots of white blood cells to make sure it's sort of like a checkpoint Charlie. Make sure that the bacteria is not sneaky to try and go up and cause all kinds of problems. Okay? Now, the colon is unique. The smooth muscle wall of the colon, instead of forming an entire ring of smooth muscle, the smooth muscle is in columns. So when they contract, they form pouches. The pouches are called haustra, right there. That's why the feces looks like that. It has pouches. You look at your dog poop, when you pick up your dog poop, it has like little pouches like that, right? And it's because of that, the contraction of the smooth muscle. And the smooth muscle is called tinea coli. Sounds like the worm, right? But that's the that's what we call the smooth muscle wall. How do you know? In case, because sometimes the colon is not as big in the cat, and I like to look for that colon that's not too big. What will confirm that you're looking at the colon? For some reason, the colon has a ton of these epiploic appendages. Very fancy term for fatty appendages. There's like lots of fatty appendages there. So you know you're looking at the colon. So identify the cecum, ascending, transverse, descending colon. There's the sigmoid, and then there's the rectum, and then there's your anus. Right here in this image, right here. That's the last sphincter that I want you to note. So this is the anal sphincter, and the anal sphincter has two parts. You see the inner smooth muscle? That's your internal anal sphincter, which continues from up there. So this is smooth muscle. And then there's an external anal sphincter, which is skeletal. And that's why the internal, it says it's involuntary, but the external is voluntary. Okay? So we know that the colon is exposed to feces that has sort of become solid now. What's going on with the colon is you don't absorb any nutrients anymore. You're done. As far as when we say nutrients, we're talking about glucose, amino acids, and fatty acids. Those nutrients have been absorbed in the stomach, in the small intestine already. Here it's on its way out. You will absorb lots of water and electrolytes in the colon. So as you absorb the electrolytes and the water, the feces becomes solid, which can be abrasive to the colon. So that's why there's a ton of goblet cells in the colon to have a thick mucus protecting it from the solidified feces. Okay? So is there chemical digestion? No. What do we call the movement here? It's called mass peristalsis. It's slower peristalsis, but it's like more powerful. And that will help push because it's being solidified, right? So you need more power than in the small intestine. It's still liquidy. But here now it's solidified, so you need to generate more power to keep squeezing that and pushing it towards the anus. And that's why we call it mass peristalsis. There's lots of bacteria in the colon. And you feed them your feces and they give you presents in the form of vitamins. The B vitamins, especially B12, which is for red blood cell maturation, and vitamin K for clotting. People with colon cancer can end up with anemia. This is why we never recommend prolonged antibiotic treatment for anybody, right? Because antibiotics kill bacteria, even your normal friendly bacteria. Okay? Be careful of taking those like I told this morning, the probiotics, the prebiotics, because they contain bacterial flora that may be different from yours. Which means you're going to mess up your own bacteria that makes these vitamins for you. Sometimes they're giving you more harm, doing you more harm than good. Okay? So you see, what you reabsorb is water, minerals. Last step is your pooping. So to poop is called defecation, which is a reflex. Remember, as the food is being pushed, right, you're absorbing, not food, the feces is being pushed, you're absorbing water, now it's solidified, and that's why it has to be mass peristalsis. And then when the feces makes it down here to the terminal part of the rectum towards the anus, it will trigger what you call the defecation reflex, which is a local sacral spinal cord reflex. Sacral spinal cord. So it's lower reflex. What does the defecation reflex do? The defecation reflex opens up the internal sphincter because the internal is smooth muscle. Remember this. Have you ever felt the urge to poop? You have ever experienced that, right? When you feel the urge to poop, that means the internal is already open. But the external is still closed. It's the same thing with urination. Okay? The external is still closed because it is skeletal muscle. So how do you open the external? Open the door, sit in the toilet, and go. Don't you do that, right? Increase abdominal pressure to help push or expel the feces, which is called defecate. So what did you get rid of? You got rid of anything that you never absorbed. Everything that you absorb is now picked up in the blood. So there's no such thing as going in the reverse. So don't believe, now that you know your anatomy and physiology, you should think twice with buying those detox diet or whatever. It's not true. I like this slide because it just summarizes everything I've been talking about for the past 2 days. See? There's the food, carbs, lipids, proteins. And then it's telling you the carbs, I digest it in the mouth and then in the small intestine. Because I see the amylase there, I see the amylase here. Okay? And then here, you see the brush border enzymes absorbed in the blood. And then the lipids, you see, erase the lingual lipase, erase that. You see the lipase here in the small intestine. Add here the help from your gallbladder, pancreatic lipase, and then enter lymphatics. There's your proteins. You see pepsin in the stomach. And then proteases, all of these proteases in the small intestine. You should just know where they came from. And then there's your dipeptidases, brush border enzymes, absorb blood. That's why I like this slide. Summary of everything. Okay? This one is a good reminder. This is why people who have diarrhea can suffer from electrolyte deficiency. The way to absorb water or electrolytes, do you see? It says concentration gradient. So there must be a concentration gradient for these precious minerals and water to move. If there's no concentration gradient, then you cannot absorb. And so that's why if we have diarrhea or if we don't take in these electrolytes, there's no way to absorb them. Okay? That explains the weakness of patients. We're going to talk about these major electrolytes, what they do in chapter 26. And that's the end of chapter 24. Look. Simon,
Trouble with that.
seriously. You done? Ah, you done. Are we? We're done. Do you have any questions on eating, digestive system?
Buffet?
Buffet?
Yeah, as a buffet time, I'm hungry.
Yummy buffet. Okay? We have, what you doing? We have 25 minutes more.